one? I don't know. How do you do it? You make no
Okay.
sense.
Hi, Madhu. माझं
हाय.
हाय. अगं बॅकड्रॉप मस्त आहे तुझा.
न्यूयॉर्कच्या बिल्डिंग्स आहेत.
आई ग कोण आले? बेस्ट अजून
तू
तू
आणि
आणि
मी.
मीच आहोत. वा मस्त. तू तर एकदम सकाळी साडी बिडी नेसून ग.
हा, मी तयार झाले की तयार होत असते एकदाच.
बघ
ऑडिओ आणि व्हिडिओ बरोबर आहे का तेवढंच चेक करण्यासाठी थोडं लवकर आले होते मी.
आई बरं झालं मी 5 मिनिटं आधी करतेच अगं लॉग इन. जनरली मी किंवा विद्या कोणीतरी करतो म्हणजे मग मीटिंग स्टार्ट केली ना मी रेकॉर्डिंग पॉज करतो.
हा,
रेकॉर्डिंग
start.
रेकॉर्डिंग स्टार्ट.
So hello everyone and welcome Madhaveshwari on Together We Can, and it's really our pleasure and honor to host you on the show. Today she is going to talk about property law and investment in mostly in India. I'm really curious, and as I like how to invest in India, how much we get return, and of course my question will be if I have to bring the money back to USA, what are the criterias? So looking forward to hear from you, and thank you so much Khan coming on our show. So over to Madhaveshwari.
good evening all, and good morning to all those who have joined from India. It's a pleasure being on this meeting and pleasure talking about a subject that is one of my favorite subjects, property law. Before I begin, I must first complete the formalities of expressing the gratitudes, because gratitude is not something which should be expressed at the end. It is something that should be expressed in the beginning itself. So my gratitudes to Vidya Joshi, Sulakshana Kulkarni, Chicago Marathi Shala, team Together We Can, and everyone who has been behind the organization of these webinars, and of course for having me on this webinar along with you. So getting along and going forward, property law is something which most people think to be a very difficult subject, even in the field of law. Civil law basically is considered to be difficult, but nonetheless what happens is we work, we earn, and in the end we end up investing somewhere and buying properties. But when we do that, we should know as to what actually we are investing the hard-earned money into. So properties, as the law has categorized, basic categorization, I'll just go from the basic categorization of the law with regard to properties. So property has been categorized into basically broadly into 3 parts. One is immovable property, second is movable property, and third is intellectual property. So what is immovable property? Immovable property is all that property that is attached to the earth and cannot be moved. So your plots, your land, your house, your buildings are all immovable properties. Movable properties, anything that can be moved and it's not permanently attached to earth. Now what is permanently attached to earth? So anyone will say that a house, when it's demolished and the bricks can be moved, so it's not permanently attached to earth. Yes, but then the nature of the property gets changed. So bricks will be movable property, but house will not be a movable property. It will be an immovable property because the nature of the property itself will get changed. Movable property is anything which you can lift from one place and shift to another place. So tents that can be attached and removed without having to change the nature of their property. So those are movable properties. And the third category is intellectual property. Now this property is all that which is the original creation of mind, but not our pure ideas. So all this is one property which cannot be seen per se or held in your hand per se as the other properties. Intellectual property, like to give an example, whatever is written in a book will be an intellectual property, but book per se will not be an intellectual property. It will be categorized into a movable property. So if I purchase a book, the idea, whatever has been written in a book will be held as a copyright or as an intellectual property. But merely because I have purchased the book, I will not have been owned or I will not own the intellectual property in that book. Now, these are the three broad categorizations of properties. Now, moving further, every property, you have some inherent rights in it. So what are the inherent rights that you hold in a property? The very foremost right that you hold in a property is an ownership right. Now, this is the highest kind of right that you have, that can be held in any property. It allows you to enjoy the property to its fullest and deal with it as you want. So how do we explain that? You can sell the property, you can use the property, you can destroy the property if you want. It's up to you, but that you can do only when you have an ownership in the property, and whatever categorization, maybe it's a movable, it's immovable, or it's an intellectual property. You can enjoy the usufructs of it, that is the fruits that you get out of that property. The second kind of property is leasehold property. Now this is a slightly lesser right than the ownership right. Leasehold is a limited right to enjoy the use of property for a specified period. Lessee cannot sell the property, but he can sublease or mortgage with the consent of the lessor, that is the original owner. Now, this is one of the rights that if you have ownership in a property, you can give limited part of that right to someone for a consideration. In ownership as well as in leasehold property. That is, if you are giving out the ownership, then even then the consideration is an important part. So even in a leasehold property, consideration is an important part. Because if the consideration is lacking, we come down to a still lesser right of leave and license. That is, again, the right to enjoyment of the property to the extent of leave, license, or permission is granted. Now, leasehold or a leave and licensee cannot do any act which will destroy the original property. So what right has been given under leasehold or under leave and license is that the lessee or the licensee will enjoy or can enjoy the property and have usufructs out of it. So these are basically different kinds of
Pause झाला का ग?
what did you say that you can enjoy the property as you wish? So inherent in it is the mode of transfer of the property. So the first mode of transfer, and which is the highest mode of transfer, is the sale. This is the highest degree of transfer, for it transfers absolute right of ownership to the purchaser for a consideration. Now here, consideration is a very important part. So sale will not be recognized as sale unless you are getting something in return for that sale. So sale is the highest degree of transfer, because when you sell a property, what you transfer is the absolute ownership in that property. And that applies again to all the three kinds of properties. Second is mortgage. Now, mortgages, we have all done mortgages in our lifetime at some point of time or another. Mortgage is you give your property as a collateral security either to the financial institute, banking institute, or sometimes even to a private individual in return for raising of funds. Mortgage is normally used for raising of funds. It is also given as or basically it is a collateral security that is given. And there are 6 types of mortgages. We need not go into the types of mortgages as to what those are. But the mortgage, once it is a mortgage, it cannot be converted into any other form of transfer. It remains a mortgage forever, and it gives you the right to redeem the property whenever you wish to have it back. So when the terms of the mortgage are fulfilled and the redemption is done, the property comes back to you. The third mode of transfer is gift. Now, what is gift? In a gift, the essential consideration, the essential condition that is in sale is lacking in a gift. In a gift, the consideration is not there. So what happens is, again, an out and out transfer of rights takes place, but there is a lack of consideration. Mostly the consideration that is considered in a gift is love and affection for the person to whom the gift is given. Therefore, when gifts are given within a family, that is from husband to wife, from the father to children, from children to parents, then the gift doesn't get taxable. There is no tax, or it comes with a minimum tax upon the transaction. The government does not charge any duty on such transaction if it is within family, because then it is a transaction of love and affection, and the property is changing hands within the family itself. But when gift goes outside this category of people, then of course the government taxes it along with as per the value of the property. But again, here the essential condition is there is no consideration passing for the giving of the gift. Third again is transfer of leasehold rights. Leasehold rights are again limited right to use of the property for specified number of years. When it goes to 99 years, the lease can be like from 6 months to 99 years. So when it is till 99 years, that is till 98 years, it is considered to be a limited right, and it's not a freehold right. But the moment you make a lease to be of 99 years, it is considered by law to be a kind of permanent transfer, because 99 years is a long period, which the law considers is a lifetime of a person. So, but still, again, even if it is a 99 years lease, it does not transfer the absolute ownership in the property. And the third mode of transfer of the property or changing hands of the property is inheritance. It can be by will or by succession by law. When it's by will, it's a testamentary succession. During your lifetime, you can decide as to who will get the property after your lifetime. So, will and succession by law is you are governed by, if you do not make any testamentary document, any testamentary deposition, then the law takes its course and law decides as to how the property will move on after your demise. Now, these are the 5 recognized modes of transfer. Other than that, there can be no transfer of particular rights in a property that is recognized by law. I hope, in fact, I would be saying that if you have any problems or difficulties with regard to what I'm expressing now, and you want to ask any questions in between, you can join in and feel free to ask them in between. So these are the kinds of property, these are the modes of you hold a property, and the modes of transfer that are recognized. So how do we move ahead? the major areas that we invest in are, or the properties that are normally invested in, is real estate, gold, capital markets, debt markets, and investments through financial service centers. Now, basically, investment through financial service centers is again investment in stocks and securities and those kinds of investments or assets. So first I move to the real estate. Now here we are specifically dealing with people who are not resident in India and more particularly resident in US, and thereafter and would want to invest in India. Now why to invest in India is the first issue. As of now, India is a developing economy and hence growth rate of the economy is higher. Therefore, returns on investment is relatively higher than what you would be doing anywhere else. So also the interest, the rate of interest is also 7 to 8% pre-tax as compared to what you get in US. And comparatively, of course, the low real estate prices. So looking into the scenario as of now, even if we think of investing in securities, stocks or bonds, this is a good time to do it because right now with the Make in India venture by the government of India, the push that is given to the SMSE sectors that are being pushed by the government, investment much good buy that can be had. On first, I'm dealing with real estates. Now, what can you purchase in a real estate in India? In a real estate, you are an NRI or a POI, that is a person of Indian origin. You are, you can purchase a house property, it is a commercial property. But what you cannot.
Oh, I think she got dropped. Just wait a couple minutes. बहुतेक ती join करेल परत.
Hey, Sulu. Savita here.
Hi, Savita.
Hey.
Hi. I think Madhu is back, right? Madhu, are you able to share screen?
Okay, Sulakshana, येतोय आता आवाज? मला वाटतं डिस्कनेक्ट झालं होतं. What I was telling was real estate. Are you able to hear me now? Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible. And we can see your screen.
Yeah. So plantation land are totally out of the purview of a person who is not resident in India for being purchased. So what you can purchase now is a housing property or a commercial property. These two are the avenues for real estate where you can invest. Landed property is also only a commercial landed property can be purchased, but agricultural land is totally out of purview for investment. Again, you can invest in companies which deal with land, but you cannot invest in companies which deal with solely for the purpose of profits. So those companies which only do the business of purchasing land and thereafter selling it, or they say that they would be plotting it and thereafter selling it, you cannot invest into those kinds of entities. Or even those entities which take up agricultural lands and convert them into farmhouse plots, that is not available for investment. So house property, maybe it's a bungalow, maybe it's a flat, any constructed housing property, or any commercial property. Maybe it can be a shop, it can be an office space, it can be an entire structure of office spaces, but having commercial use, that is available for investment. Moving further, what is more available for investment is real estate development. So you may not be able to invest into the land per se, but you may be able to invest into development of townships, the development of infrastructure, development of roads, and those kinds of contracts or those kinds of entities which cater to these kinds of investment. If there is an LLP, if there is a corporate body which is into the development or infrastructure business, you are able to invest in those kinds of entities. Now, what is the benefit of investing into real estate? If we are thinking about housing property, then with the coming of the RERA Act in 2016, it has become much more easier for us, and the transparency. Earlier drawbacks that were mostly hit by these industries was the possession was not timely, or there was not much professionalism, or the goods were not delivered as promised, and you could end up in a long litigation. That has now been curtailed by the introduction of the RERA Act of 2016. So if you are thinking of buying a house property over here, of course this is a good time to buy it. More so, the only part or the cliche part about this is that if it is your second house here in India, it becomes taxable for the purpose of rent, even if you do not give it on rent to anyone. More particularly, only if it is your second house. If you already have one house and if you're going for a second investment, then the second house gets taxable even for the rent deemed to be a rent. That is a provision under the Indian Income Tax Act, which deems that every second house would be rented in. You won't be staying in all the houses. And that is the presumption behind the deemed income from that house. So depending upon the locality and depending upon the market value of the property, the deemed income will be considered at the time of taxation.
So the rent on my second house is taxable. Is
now, even if I have said that agricultural land or farmhouse land, exactly. If you already have one house, the first house not be tax would always be there on all the houses, even on the first house. But if you are going for a second house, then there is a deeming provision under the Income Tax Act which says that you are not staying in it. Since you are not residing in it, it is rented out. Otherwise, there is no reason for the second house to be purchased. And therefore, the law presumes that there is an income from rent from that house, and therefore that becomes taxable. The deemed rent gets taxable on the second house.
But what if I don't rent it, or if I don't earn any income from it?
Even if you don't rent it, because it is a deeming provision, it is a presumption that you are getting a rent.
Oh, okay.
Hi, this is Vikram. I have a question. So,
yeah.
for this, you said like an NRI cannot buy agricultural land, but if I have a Indian passport, but I am living here, would I still be considered NRI, or can I still buy like agricultural land because I have an
No, you
Indian
would still be considered an NRI.
Okay. And the second question is, can you inherit agricultural?
Yes, I was coming to that part of it, that even if you can't buy an agricultural land or a farmhouse, but if you inherit it by succession, that is, if it's your ancestral property, which has come down from your forefathers, then there is no bar to inheritance of any kind on such asset. So if it's coming from your forefathers, from your great grandfather or grandfather or father, then you can definitely inherit such agricultural land, farmhouse or plantation land, whatever it is. That bar does not come. The bar comes only when you want to purchase it. That bar is not to someone who will inherit it by succession, because it is already there in your family.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So, Madhu, then if I have like an inherited agricultural land, can I sell it? Like I'm not, let's assume I'm not a resident.
Yes, you can sell it. There is no bar on selling of any property as such.
Okay.
You can sell it. Just referring to the discussion we had before we started the session. If it's your ancestral agricultural land, you can sell off and gather the proceeds from the said land.
I can just tell you that you can not only can sell it, but you can bring the money through the banks. Let's say Maharashtra Bank, you can convert the money rupees into dollars, and you can bring it after paying the taxes to the government of India.
Okay.
So there are two kinds of taxes that would kick in at this point of time. By the inherent fact that of that property, so that much of an amount would be taxable. So what happens particularly is, even if you are an NRI, if your income or in a particular financial year exceeds 2,50,000 rupees, then the income becomes taxable. So whatever slot you fall in after that, that amount gets taxed as per the Indian Income Tax Act. Once you pay that tax, the amount becomes free for being used as per your wish. Does that satisfy your query, Sulakshana?
Yeah, it does. Okay.
Yeah. So moving on, this is one part of inheritance, and the second part is of gift. So if you are an NRI or a POI, you can transfer your property by way of gift to anyone in India, or and vice versa. You can receive a gift as well. Again, the condition is that if it's within if it is within family. So if it's between father and son, husband and wife, mother and daughter, mother and son, within the first degree of relationships, the gift would not be taxable. The gift will there will also not be any registry charges for the said gift. But the moment, but there is a cap of again 2,50,000 rupees. If you are transferring some money, so again money is considered as a movable property under law. So if you are transferring some money, liquid assets, to your relations or first relations here in India, then to one person it cannot exceed more than 2,50,000 Indian rupees. So if it exceeds that, the gift again would be taxable, or the amount above 2,50,000 will be taxable. Till that limit, you can give it, you can send the money to any one individual in your family. but it cannot exceed again 2,50,000, because then that person's income would become more than that. Because even if you receive a property in a gift, maybe liquid in a liquidated form, or in the form of a property as such, or immovable property as such, then or even if they are shares or securities or bonds that are already purchased, even then if the value exceeds 2,50,000, they would definitely be charged with the taxing. But there is no bar on giving property as a gift within the family. If it is going outside the family, then of course the gift deed per se gets taxed for the registry charges. Now the third aspect, which is very close to Indian people, is investments in gold. And the way the prices are going up as of now is something which should be really looked into. There is only one hitch in this, that you may buy gold per se, but NRIs and POIs are not permitted to buy gold bonds. So if you have to purchase gold bonds will have to be purchased in the name of the members of the family who are resident in India. You will not be able to purchase the gold bonds in your own name who is not resident in India. But gold bonds again are a very good kind of investments, because particularly now the government is giving, apart from the escalation of the gold price, there is also the bonds also come with a 2.5% interest rate on the bonds, and on maturity the capital gains, you are exempted from the capital gains tax, which benefit will not be available to you if you purchase the bullion in the material format. Investment in securities is again something which we should really think of, because again with the boost that is being given by the government to the markets, that the investment in securities and stocks or through debt securities, as long as you are investing in as long as you are investing in a non-repatriation format, then there is no requirement for permission from the government in purchase of those shares or securities or debenture bonds. But if you are thinking, but if you want it to be on a repatriation basis, then of course the government kicks in, and then you need to have permission from the government for investment in those kinds of securities. So if you are investing in shares or securities or debentures, there are two routes basically through which you can do it. One is the investor, the automatic route. Here the investor does not require the permission of the government. The monies can be transferred directly through banking channel to the concerned stock exchanges. Again, this can be done through a recognized stock exchange, which has been recognized by the SEBI, and you can purchase the shares of your choice directly through your broker or you yourself. The second kind of purchase is repatriation investment. So if you are looking for a repatriation investment, then the investor or the Indian company in which you want to invest, they need to take a permission from the government of India. Now these are the two routes in which you can bring in your money or invest your money in the corporate sector by purchase of shares or debentures of securities. Now, again, here, there are some sectors where you cannot invest. So, you may say that if I want to, when I say that you can purchase shares of any company that you are interested in, again, there you have restriction. So there are investments which are particularly prohibited for investment by the RBI under its master circular. So what are those? Business of chit fund, you cannot invest in that. You cannot invest in a Nidhi company. Again, you cannot invest in agricultural or plantation activities, real estate business, or construction of farmhouses. So when I say that in a real estate business, you can invest in the construction or an infrastructure business, in that construction of farmhouses is specifically excluded. Gambling and betting, of course, because gambling and betting itself is banned and considered as illegal in India. Manufacture of cigars, cheroots, cigarettes, and all such things, that is also out for not available for investment. Print media particularly is not available for investment. What you can invest is in entertainment industry, but print media, that is newspaper, magazines, those houses or print houses, those are not available for investment. Then trading in transferable development rights. Now, what are transferable development rights? Transferable development rights are those rights that the government gives in lieu of the part of the land that is taken by the government for development. So if a part of the land is taken up by the government for road purposes, mostly in urban areas, instead of giving a compensation in terms of monetary compensation, what the government gives is TDR rights, that is transferable development rights. Those rights can be used for construction on the said property, or you can also transfer it to someone else to be used for construction on some other property, which is normally used by builders, particularly for raising a floor or two on the existing building, or it is used at some other place where they can raise the number of floors in those constructions. So there are some companies which deal with only trading of these rights. So what they basically do is are only facilitators in transferring of these rights from one party to the other. Because many times it so happens that whatever TDR you receive, that TDR cannot be used on that particular building, and the person does not have any other property where it can be used. So what people normally do is they just sell out their TDR rights to some person who is able to use it cumulatively. So those companies or those entities which deal in these kinds of TDR rights, those entities are not available for investment for an NRI. Again, the sectors that are not open are those are not open for anyone for private investment, like the atomic energy sector, or the railways, or the PSUs, where the government is specifically operating, but it is not open for a private sector or any private individual for investment. So these are basically 8-9 sectors which are, even if you want to purchase the shares or bonds in these industries, they are not available for investment, or the investment is particularly prohibited in these sectors. And, if you think more so in the current scenario, SMEs and MSMEs are a better option, or the LLPs that are coming up are a better option for investments looking into the area of interest of your choice as to in which sector they are working. But in an MSME, up to 24% of their share capital can be invested by an NRI or a POI. And that is quite a good percentage to be held in any small scale industry or a medium scale industry by a person. Again, if we go further, IFSC is something which is coming up in India, in Gujarat. If you're doing your trading through IFSC, there are a lot of benefits that you get. Instead of going to the regular stock markets for purchasing the shares and bonds, it is always better to do it through an IFSC center. IFSC center is basically it facilitates, it advises. It's the one spot place where you can have investments, and if you're doing your business through IFSC or if you're investing through an IFSC, then there is an exemption on the income tax, the interest payable by the non-residents on the amounts borrowed, the securities transaction and tax commodities in this are recognized on a stock exchange, and the dividend or distribution on tax distribution or alternate investment in the companies is facilitated by the center itself. So it's a kind of one-stop spot which can be availed of, and is a much reliable place to go to for investments. And in all this, the tax implications are not much. As per the Indian Income Tax Act, the flat rate above 2,50,000 is 30%. So you fall into the slab of 30% for the income that you have from the properties or the investments that are made in India. Indian Income Tax Act does not calculate whatever you earn outside India. That is totally subject to the tax that you are paying as per the laws in the country that you are situated in. Whatever investment that you would be doing in India and whatever income you would be getting from those investments in India would be only that income would be taxable as per the Indian Income Tax Act. So even if you are sending in money in India through any channel, maybe through gift, maybe through investment, the money that is coming in will not be taxable under the Indian Income Tax Act unless it does not, unless it exceeds 2,50,000 rupees, which is the basic slab for any taxable income. If you are investing in gold, it would be advisable that the gold bonds, instead of the bullion or direct purchasing of the metal, the investment is made in securities and gold bonds, which are issued by the government. Again, being an NRI, those are not directly available for purchase by an NRI, but they can definitely be purchased by in the name of the family members or the first degree family members who are there situated over here. Merely for the added benefit of the added interest that you get, the income earned from such gold bonds and securities is exempt. Therefore, it's much advisable to go for that investment, to go for securities basically if you are thinking of gold. In the long term capital gains, if it's a long term investment and the capital gains are after 5 years or so, it gets taxed at 20% indexation. And short term, again, that is something that comes to 30%. Because you would not be holding the property for a long time, and then the capital gain tax will kick in at that point of time. In case of gains of equity shares or equity oriented mutual funds, the tax rate is 10% and 15% for long term and short term respectively. So 10% for long term, and again, if you are selling out your shares in a very short period of time, then it gets taxed at 15%. But all said and done, if the investments are made over here, in terms of the tax implications, you are on a much safer side and a brighter side. If it's on a non-repatriation basis, then the investments can be done directly. The RBI does not come in, or rather the government machinery does not much come in a picture, and you can do the investments with as ease as if you are very much staying in India. Only if it's a repatriation basis, that is, you are looking to getting the money back again converted into dollars to the country where you are staying, then there are some requirements which the RBI requires you to seek permission at the time of investment itself only. So if you want to convert the money back into dollars and take back to US, then the RBI does come into picture. But if you're not looking into that, and if you're looking only into investments, then it's a non-repatriation basis, and then the government does not much mind it, and the RBI does not come into picture, and you can invest it as per your your wish and will. Into those properties or kinds of securities which are permissible as per the master circulars of the RBI that are issued from time to time. I think this is pretty much that I thought of covering in this session. If there are any queries or issues that you think you need to address, I need to address, just come up with your queries. We'll have a short session for that.
Hi, this is Vikram. That was a very nice presentation. So you said anything above 2,50,000 you have to pay tax. So even for like gift, if you get a property as a gift from your parents, if the value of the property is more than 2,50,000, you have to pay the tax on that right away.
No, if it is within a family, first degree relations are for parents and children.
Okay, so for that there is no tax then.
There won't be any taxing.
Okay, thank you.
But so suppose you are stationed in US and you are sending money to your father.
Okay.
Direct cash to your father. And if it exceeds 2,50,000, then anything about 2,50,000 would be taxable as an income of your father.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Yes, I do have a question. I think that most of the people probably needs a clarification. Has to do with when you say NRI versus the people who are citizens of the United States or other countries. So are the rules different for the people, non-resident Indians, when you say that is the people who may be non-resident Indians with the passport holding from government of India versus people like us who don't have Indian passport anymore? Are the rules different for the non-citizens versus the citizens of India?
No, you would be considered as persons of Indian origin. So the rules will not be much different. There are fine lines of distinction in between NRIs and POIs. And again, for POIs, that is persons of Indian origin, the restrictions are more in terms of avenues that are available for investment.
I think the most of the people have questions has to do with the people like us who moved a number of years back in this country and have the properties there, and if they want to sell the properties, and can they bring the money? I think that's where, I know you explained that, I think that most of the people probably are more interested in that discussion in how to bring the money into dollars and without getting into legal issues, you know.
conversion of your property or selling of your property and taking away the money is the most easiest kind of thing that can be done in any country. Because what the only implication that will happen at that point of time is the income tax that you are required to pay, or the capital gain tax that you are required to pay, and of course the tax for the conversion that gets attached to such transactions of conversion from one currency to another. But other than that, there is no hassle for selling of a property. The law particularly kicks in basically with regard to the purchase or investment in a particular sector. Selling is not much of a problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Madhu, if they have any questions, is it okay if they send you in email?
Yeah, it's okay. If apart from this, someone who after viewing the recording has any questions or any doubts, you can just mail me the queries, and I'll be happy to reply to them.
Awesome. Thank you. So anybody else has any questions? Okay. So I'd like to take this moment to thank you, Madhu, for joining us on our Together We Can team today and sharing this useful information. Personally, I feel that when we are here in United States and we have, like Azoba said, that we have property over there, it's always a question what we want to do, what is possible, what we can, how we can explore those options. So thank you for sharing everything and those details with us. We really appreciate it. And thank you to Vidya Joshi.
Sulakshana, sorry, can you please repeat it? I lost your voice.
Hey, can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I think she dropped.
No, I'm back. I'm back.
Yes.
She's here.
Okay, so no, thank you so much, Madhu, for being a part of our webinar series. We've been hosting these webinars for the last 3 or 4 months, and all the people around our community, they come and share all these beautiful ideas or thoughts or like information with us. So I really appreciate that you joined us today. I know it's early morning for you. You're joining from India, and this gesture is much appreciated by all of us. So thank you so much for being with us today. And a big thank you to Vidya Joshi for this initiative of Together We Can. And before I take a leave, I do want to let you know, Madhu, that Savita is also joined. She did ping, but you had dropped off that point. So if you want to say hi. How's it?
Hey, Madhu. Hi.
Okay.
Yeah. Sulu, thanks for that.
No problem at all. Okay, thank you everybody for joining today's session. We'll be sharing the recording soon. And if you have any questions, you feel free to reach out to twc2020@gmail.com, and we'll forward those questions to Madhaveshwari. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Hear that? Oh, sorry. Mama, did you hear that?